start with a question. Good morning, Shannon. I'm so thankful that I discovered your show on my Apple TV.
Awesome.
When searching the YouTube app. The minute I started listening, I realized you were talking about my son. My question today is about stimming. To be honest, this behavior makes me so uncomfortable because I don't know how to respond to it. Should I allow him to spin hands or wiggle arms when he needs to, or should I attempt to redirect him? As his mom, I don't want to make him self-conscious and always be correcting the behavior, but then I also want him to weave this into his world and environment. I just love this mom. I have researched on both allowing the behavior as needed and trying to redirect the behavior, and after a roller coaster of emotions, I'm just as confused. What actually is the real need for the child to grow and nurture properly, not just be socially acceptable? And thank you so much. And I thank you because I think this hits the nail on the head of why it's so emotional for us as parents. We hear, well, in order for him to fit in with the other kids, he's got to lose that. And then we think, well, that's kind of, making him fit in. And why doesn't everybody else change to just get over it?
Right. Well, and there's many different ways you can think of this, and my answer will be different depending on the functioning level of this particular child and the age of this child. So what I always say, and Ivar will forgive me, my mentor professor who changed the field of ABA, Ivar Lovas, always used to have a little container of pencils on his desk, and they were all completely sharpened. He would actually never use these pencils, but they had to be sharpened and of equal height and facing up, and the only thing I ever saw him use them for was to pull a pencil out and just shake it around, right? And I always used to make fun of him and say, this is your self-stimulatory behavior, right? And we all have different types of self-stimulatory behavior. I've said this before. People will, twirl their hair, for instance, or I don't know, like actually move a pen like this.
Oh,
a lot of people
I have
do
clips that I play with here.
Right?
Yeah.
There you go. Oh yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I do too. Now that you mentioned that, so everybody has something, but I guess they're socially acceptable. So let's look at the definition of what is socially acceptable. I would say it's just something that can be ignored. Is probably socially acceptable. If it's distracting from the situation, then it starts to be considered just not acceptable because it's too much of a different thing. So like sometimes with our kids, you'll see a child of a certain age, let's say holding an object. So that's kind of a hoarding behavior, which is classified currently under the self-stimulatory behaviors. And it's completely fine because they're young enough where it doesn't seem inappropriate or in some way stigmatizing. If the child is, let's say, 16 and holding an object all the time, like a stuffed animal or a blanket or something, then it becomes very inappropriate, right? But if the child's 5, it's not so bad, or 4 or 3 and so on. So some of this stuff is really much more about making things appropriate. Some of the behaviors that this mom mentioned are not necessarily appropriate under any condition. For instance, hand flapping. Now, would I target hand flapping in all situations? I probably would for my own child because I just want them to fit in more and not be stigmatized. I don't like the concept of other kids looking at my child and saying, that kid is weird. Yeah. I just wouldn't want that. But it would be the same as, for instance, if my child was, for lack of a better thing to compare to, like picking his nose or, I don't know, cleaning his ears or things that you see people do, but they're very highly socially inappropriate. So let's not label this as something that's exclusive to autism. It's just that we're trying to teach our kids to fit in, right? And not get negative types of attention right away. So how I would approach it would be that I would limit certain behaviors to certain time frames, so that it's not a sudden imposition on my child. So I would probably say, when he is watching a movie that he's very excited about, it's okay for him to jump up and down for a few minutes because that shows excitement right now. Right. Later on, I might decide to eliminate that as well. But it's not appropriate for him to jump up and down and hand flap if he's at the dinner table or in the school or those types of. So I would set up something that allows some I guess, expression of that self-stimulatory thing in certain circumstances, and then I would gradually fade it off so that the child is actually not doing it. Having said that, I would want to replace with something that's a little bit more appropriate. Now, some things the best way to deal with it is to allow the child to go into their own room in privacy and do some of these things, and you let it be.
Right.
Other things are replaceable by, for instance, the closest comparison to, let's say, hand flapping or body rocking is dance. Yeah. Right? When we dance, we're doing all sorts of strange body movements, and that's all acceptable. I mean, even if you are completely out of tune with the music, it's still acceptable because it's considered dance.
Yeah.
And there's numerous environments within which dance is okay. So I would try to replace it. I would make sure that if your child has a lot of physical, gross motor types of self-stimulatory, that's what I would be working on replacing it with. So I would place my child in dance class of different types and give him an outlet, and also give him something that is perhaps releases that sensory need, but is also much more socially appropriate.
Okay, and I think that that's really what's key for us, for parents to walk away with, is that there has to be some replacement for it.
Right.
And I know that there are people who are out there who say, oh, you got to get the child to stop doing that, and don't include that bit of information in that discussion, and that is absolutely key.
It is key, and I can't tell you the number of times, Shannon, that I've had a family really come down hard on a self-stimulatory behavior, and then it's replaced by something, like the child will replace it. Yeah. So if you don't replace it with something appropriate that fulfills the same need, it'll replace itself with something else. And that's also very interesting. Traditionally, self-stimulatory behaviors in behavior and analytic terms are considered intrinsically motivated. So they're not, in other words, we don't know all that much about why they occur, and the motivation to do these types of things tend to be more an internal function. So there's some reinforcing thing going on inside. My personal feeling about the self-stimulatory behaviors are they are differentiated based on their function. I think certain behaviors are pain relief related. Mm-hmm. In other words, I think that some of the kids that you see children with severe gastrointestinal distress will often lean over an object like a countertop or something, and they will body rock like this. Yeah. That, I think, is actually producing some relief. Yeah. Sometimes you will see children there's various types of things that are pain relief, self-stimulatory behaviors. Other things could potentially be related to the over or under regulation of sensory input. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you'll see kids who are just very much looking just from the corner of their eyes. And, there's a lot of research on that, and in terms of direct, they actually are missing central vision, and they're trying to look through peripheral vision, and that would make sense, absolutely. And that sort of thing does change based on amount of light, darkness, and so that would make even more sense that they're trying to use their peripheral vision for acuity. Yeah. And so that's another possible cause. I think kids tend to do more of these repetitive, the definition of the self-stimulatory behaviors are stereotypical repetitive behaviors that don't seem to have an adaptive function. Right. But I think the reason that people do them more is because they have anxiety. A lot of our kids and adults, we tend to do repetitive things when we have anxiety. It's just, that's part of nature, that's part of psychology. We also tend to be more controlling when we have anxiety. So you will tend to want things to be more organized, more in a particular pattern that you're used to, all those types of things. So I think it helps parents if they can try to figure out what in their when do these behaviors occur. A lot of times parents tell me they occur when the child is placed in a new environment, for instance. So then that would tell you that the child's not feeling safe, they're feeling anxious, that's why their self-stimulatory stuff increases. So, reduce it, but also give the child some way to feel safe, right? To feel more calm and reduce the anxiety, not just control the behavior.
Yeah, and I think that sings to all of us parents because we want to fulfill their needs.
Right.
and we
Right.
feel like taking away that behavior, we're taking that away. So this helps us to be able to language it in our heads and go, I'm going to fill the need in a different way.
That's right.
So that they can
exactly.
be able to. One of the things you said a couple of years ago that really rang to me, we were talking about the hand flapping and thinking about all the things that your child won't learn if this is what they're doing, because they won't be writing if they're doing this. It interrupts
There's
things.
so many other things.
So it's not just the social components of it. So
having said that, of course, I always specifically when we talk about kids who hand flap or take objects and do this with it, which is a pretty common self-stimulatory behavior. You and I know both one of our guys who later turned that into drums, playing the drums, who is unbelievably talented and is performing now, playing in a group. I mean,
and
so
brilliant.
Yeah, and it's brilliant, and so it is very possible to take those things and turn them into something functional.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I love that. Okay, I want to move on to this next question. My son has a lot of trouble in school, and we are doing what we can to hopefully get him some ABA in the near future. For now, I'm called into school at least 3 times a week, twice a day, to help him calm.
That's terrible.
My question is, what can I do when he is trying for attention by spitting, screaming, or saying, I'm going to kill you? My first thought is that ABA would say ignore the behavior, but I'm not sure how this can be done in this setting. And this brings for me, the crux
so
of everything,
tough.
the parent who knows that what they need is ABA, they're trying to get it. I hope that you will write into us and let us help you to figure out what the quickest way for that to happen is.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to be able to help, and we would need to know where you are, what state you're in, what city you're in, and we can try to help. But the fastest way to help you right now, I think, is if you were to get online on the BIP Builder, the CIFA and the BIP Builder. The CIFA is the Card Indirect Functional Assessment, and the BIP Builder is a Behavior Intervention Plan Builder. So, and these are both online, and they're very easy to access, and they're extremely cheap, and so you can access them for sure, and it would be very helpful. Here's how you do this. Any child, any kind of behavior that occurs could have a number of different functions or reasons why it's occurring. And until you identify the function or the reason for a behavior, you will not know exactly how to intervene. So, for example, your child is saying things like, I'm going to kill you, I think. And what else is he doing?
Spitting and screaming.
Spitting and screaming. So you have to, first of all, treat all of those as individual behaviors. And so we could talk about spitting, doesn't matter, or screaming, doesn't really matter. So he could be screaming because he likes to get attention. He could be screaming because he really has figured out that every time I scream, they will take me out of the classroom. So what he's really trying to do is get out. So he's trying to escape or avoid the classroom. He could be screaming because he wants an object that someone else has. That would be a tangible function. So these are different functions. Now, based on which one it actually is, in his case, you have a series of different interventions. If he's screaming because he wants to get out of the classroom, then you want to make sure that you do not allow him out of the classroom.
For screaming,
right. And instead, then the focus would be to teach him to ask to take a break out of the classroom, in which case he would get a break out of the classroom. If he's screaming because he wants something someone else is holding onto, you would make sure he doesn't get that object if he screams, but that he can ask to have a similar object or that object for a short period of time, and then he gets it. So every function essentially helps us identify the how to deal with the behavior. So in your case, we know what the behaviors are. We don't know anything about why he's doing them. So if you go online and you go to the CIFA that I was mentioning, which is at Skills
it's skillsbipbuilder.com, but it is a part of Skills altogether as well, if you want to look at all of Skills. But skillsbipbuilder.com will get you to the CIFA and just the BIP Builder.
So what you do is you go go in the CIFA and you answer these questions. It'll ask you questions about when the behavior occurs, under what circumstances, typically what types of things are done, usually, that sort of thing. And it helps you identify the actual function or the reason for each behavior. And then that transfers to the BIP builder, which gives you a ton of interventions for each behavior. Make sure you do this, you do this, and you can pick all the interventions that make sense to you and then hand them to the teacher, and hopefully he has an aide or some other support in school, and those are the people that need to be implementing that as well as you. But it sounds like it's mostly happening in school. Now, it's tough on you to be asked to go to school. It's very inappropriate of them to be just calling you to take care of him twice a day or 3 times a week, whatever it is. It's absolutely not appropriate and not enough. The law says that your child is entitled to a free and appropriate education, and that includes the management of these types of behaviors and issues. The school, no matter how small it is, needs to contact a resource person or someone who is a BCBA who has the expertise to be able to assist when these types of things are happening. The fact that they keep coming to you is really, it's almost illegal in terms of asking you to just take care of something that is their responsibility. Now, please, therefore, also do look at, push the school to get you help, because the next thing will happen is they'll just kick your child out and blame you. Right. And we don't want that to happen. And I've seen that happen way too many times with my kids. So, get the resources from the CIFA and BIP builder that'll help, but also make sure that your school knows they're responsible for taking care of this situation. I feel so bad because I know how it is when schools call us. It's just, it's such a stressful experience. But also imagine how stressful it is for your child at this point, because whatever it is he's wanting, he hasn't figured out how to ask for it other than those threatening things and those bad behaviors. Challenging behavior is always just a form of communication. It's always a result of being frustrated and not knowing how to communicate in any other way.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with you about your child's going to lose their placement. That's the next thing that's coming. And something that we can all do to avoid that is send an email, because our lawyers tell us that counts as written communication with the school, and ask them to do a functional behavior assessment on the behavior. Meanwhile, you're doing the CIFA on your own and getting your ducks in a row, but ask them to do an FBA, put it back on them, or your child will lose their placement.
And by the way, the FBA is what the CIFA assists you with.
Yes, absolutely. But they should be doing it.
Right.
But don't count on them to do it right. Do the CIFA yourself.
Right.
But get it in writing, because otherwise they'll say, "Oh, well, your child's losing the placement." If you put it on them to do the FBA, they're going to have to scramble to get some things in order. Make them do their jobs.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to move on to this, because our next question is about the CIFA.
Okay.
Somebody, and actually, do you remember our haircut mom, the boy who has been a little bit perseverating on cutting hair?
Okay.
So she refers to herself now as the haircut mom. We love this. She's working on the CIFA.
Okay, great.
And she says, please help me interpret question 16, which is, in quotations, seems not to care if anyone sees him engage in the behavior. And she says, he only cares if he's caught red-handed. He knows we disapprove, but other people who don't know what he's doing, he doesn't care. So that qualifies as he doesn't care.
Read that section again.
Okay.
He seems to...
He only cares if he's caught red-handed.
Okay.
He knows we disapprove, but other people who don't know what he's doing, he doesn't care if they see him do it.
Okay.
So then the answer to that question of seems not to care if anyone sees him engage in the behavior is no.
Is he does care, because he cares when you see him.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it's
the opposite of what I would have thought.
So you say yes. And the reason for that is just listening to, because if you say he doesn't care when others see him, that's already eliminating any possible intervention for if he was to care. Okay. And now let's look at what you actually wrote to me. I can tell you what the function is. The function is he's getting negative attention from you. Oh. So, and if you had said no to that question, that option would not come up as an intervention.
Okay.
So he's clearly getting negative attention from you on that.
Okay, great. And then she went on to write another question. She said, haircut mom again. Love this. Can we use an obsessive/preferred item activity as a reinforcer?
Yes.
She goes on to talk about, do we run the risk of a meltdown if he doesn't get it or reinforce the obsession? She said, of course, my ABA smart, neurotypical 8-year-old used the haircut obsession as a reinforcer to get her brother to play with her. If you play with me, I'll let you cut the hair of my doll. This was 2 weeks ago, and I just found out. Our basic rule has always been no destruction of toys, but in this case, he had the okay from the owner, his sister. Should we allow this kind of trading to go on between siblings?
I love it.
This reinforces my concern that my son can easily be manipulated by anyone who knows his preferences. Preferences can change. How can we train him to maintain his logic despite the temptations? And thank you. Don't you love this question? It's power packed.
Not only do I love this question, I love that 8-year-old.
I know.
Oh my God.
Do we have a job for her in a couple of years?
That sibling is amazing.
She's on it.
Yes, she is. So she's using a principle called the Premack principle. This is wonderful. You should absolutely use his preferences as a reinforcer. And yes, so you don't want to just use that one thing as a reinforcer, because then he will just continue to work for that. And but you should absolutely, and what I would do is, if that's a very powerful reinforcer, cutting hair, you may want to just reserve that for very difficult tasks. So tasks that really require a powerful reinforcer. I love what your daughter did, or I'm assuming
I think it is a daughter, yes.
I just love that, because that's so appropriate. She's not, come play with my doll. The game itself could be cutting hair. I remember my daughter doing that with her friends when they were young. So that is perfectly fine. Don't worry about it becoming obsessive, because, in fact, the more we use a reinforcer, the more we satiate on it and move on to other reinforcers. It does have an obsessive nature, but then everything that is reinforcing to us is of somewhat of an obsessive nature to us. Like, if you really love donuts, you're going to end up eating a lot of donuts, and it becomes almost obsessive. So we tend to want our reinforcers, and that's just the way it is. This is a reinforcer for him. I would not prevent it from happening at all times, first of all. Secondly, didn't we just last time decide he should become a hairstylist? And what are we talking about? At some point, he's going to have to learn how to do this right.
Right.
So yeah, I generally, let me use another example, Shannon, which people ask me all the time, which is computer, right? A lot of kids are just obsessed with computer. Yeah. But the truth is, I don't limit it. In fact, I go with the social norm. 10 years ago, maybe I would have said no computer, because not every kid was on the computer. But as time changed, you come to realize that if you're not on the computer, you're odd. Right? You have to be on the computer. In fact, you need to know these games that you play with other kids. And so then it became, okay, let's just do 1 hour or whatever it is. So you always have to look at the child's age, circumstances, what their friends are doing. That's what sets the norm, right? What we're trying to do is we're trying to fit our kids into the norm. So you always want to look around and say, okay, so what are, and another portion of this question that was very good as well was, will this cause meltdowns? Yes, it will. And that's fantastic, because it gives you the opportunity to work with a meltdown.
Yeah.
It gives you the opportunity to teach him to transition in and out without meltdowns. Yeah. And if you were to avoid situations, you'd never have that opportunity.
That's a really good thing for all of us to hear, because a lot of times when we get to ABA, it's because there's been a period of time when we have sidestepped every possible thing we can, so that we will not get to the meltdown.
Right.
And what happens is that the ABA therapists come in and they create circumstances which will bring up the meltdown, and that brings up anxiety in the parents. But what happens is they're there working with us, and they show us that it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is how we make progress, and then the meltdowns go away. But we've been used to walking down a different sidewalk, because that one has something they'll perseverate on.
Right. And then by doing that, the child learns that their meltdown is very effective.
And powerful.
Yes. And also, my philosophy is anything that's related to fear, you have to do it.
Yes.
Right? So we tend to, I always tell parents, don't walk on eggshells around your child. Like, that's just ridiculous. The child ends up determining our behavior versus the other way around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. And I want to start with a question that we had come in from a grandma. How can I get my granddaughter to wash her dish after using it? She constantly forgets and doesn't want me to remind her or nag her. She is 12. I'm trying to get her to have good habits and clean up after herself. I told her if she didn't remember to wash her plate or dish, then the next day she would have to wash double. Sometimes she forgets that also and then has to wash double that day. So help us to get Grandma on the ABA train here so that she can get it done and see the result, because I think this is a great grandma, and once you see that you can use a technique and it works, it's so exciting.
It is very exciting. She's 12. I would make the assumption that she can read. I'm not sure, but let's assume she can read at this point, and then we'll modify it in case she can't. I would take a piece of paper and I would write number 1, take dishes to dishwasher, number 2, or sink, number 2, wash dishes, or number 3, use soap, or whatever it is. And even if you just need one single thing that says wash dishes, and she knows how to do it, she just needs that reminder, I would write it on a piece of paper. And by the way, if she doesn't know how to read, you can also take a picture of her washing dishes, and that would be the cue. But essentially, what you do is you just, for the next, let's say, week, you don't even mention anything anymore, but as soon as she's finished eating, you put that piece of paper in front of her. That's it. If that's sufficient for her to get up and wash her dishes, then good. Then it's working. Then you need to just keep doing that. Next week, after you've done that for a week, you place the instruction. So let's say the granddaughter is Shannon and I am you, and I would just initially I would put it right in front of her and make sure she's reading it. That's the first week. The second week I would just put it out like that. The third week I would just put it out in front of me, and this is still at the end of the meal. The fourth week I would probably take a blank piece of paper and just put it on the table, and the fifth week I would probably have the blank piece of paper on the table from the beginning of the meal, and then I would stop. And that would be a fade-out schedule, and you want to make sure that at every phase of it doesn't have to be a week for each phase, it could be 3 days, but you want to make sure that the child is really good, like that your stimulus, your SD, your instruction, which is the place, this object, is effective, and that your child gets up and actually does what they're supposed to do. And you are now gradually fading it. So at first you're positional fading it, then you're fading the actual stimulus itself so that it's blank and doesn't have words written on it. If it becomes ineffective, for instance, once you moved it from directly there to here, she no longer pays attention, you go back a phase. So you go back to where it was effective and you do that again 3 days. In the meantime, every time she does it successfully, you reward her. So at the end of the doing it, you will give her a dessert or some candy or something, whatever works for you, or just praise. And that's that.
Yeah.
It's really that simple. Instead of punishment, first of all, never really works unless it's immediate. So the fact that she would have to wash twice as many tomorrow, forget it. There's no connection between that and the action that occurred yesterday. That's a very, very advanced type of thing to realize my actions today cause some consequence that occurs tomorrow night. That's extremely advanced. Most normal teenagers don't even get that, typically developing teenagers and adults. So the second thing is, though, that instead of punishment, it's always preferable to do antecedent control. So you're modeling a behavior. She already knows the behavior. All she really needs is a reminder.
Right. Right.
And by doing it this way, you're producing a habit. With the reminder, there's no reason to get angry about it. It's just a reminder, and let me know if it works after a month.
And I just want to address one thing. So because this is a child who says, I don't want to be nagged, right? So the first time she puts the piece of paper in front of her, there's going to be a reaction. There might be eye rolling. There might be I remember. And does grandma want to react to anything that
Not
happens?
at all. In fact, I would suggest once you place the paper, you just walk away.
Okay.
You're not being nagged. And if she says, I don't want to be nagged, if she says anything like that, don't respond.
Yeah, you don't say, I'm not nagging you. I watched a show and they said to do this, and this is me not nagging.
Right.
Which is what I would do, right? Which is why
Don't respond
nothing.
at all.
You just walk away.
The single response from the minute you place that thing down to the minute to the single thing you do is wait for the behavior to occur and reinforce it. Your single verbalization after putting this down is a reward.
There we go.
Let's be really clear.
We love that. And then let us know. We want to know how that worked. I think it's going to shed a whole new light. Okay, I want to move on to a question from a teacher. A 12-year-old with autism, nonverbal, self-injurious, etc., has just enrolled in my class. He has never received ABA therapy. I am not trained in it, but have been reading about it. My questions are, is he too old to benefit? And will 2 hours a day or 10 a week be too little to make a difference in a 12-year-old? Mm-hmm. And I want to start by thanking this teacher. I love it when teachers are good teachers and say, I don't know everything, but I'm willing to learn. They're excited to learn. Those are the teachers we want to clone and make more of. We salute you. It's okay to not know everything, but it's brilliant to say, I want to learn more.
Right, absolutely. And it is, I also love working with teachers who are so open to these discussions. You know, let's address all these different things. 2 hours a day, nothing is not enough. I mean, anything you do in ABA is helpful. But 2 hours a day for a 12-year-old who has self-injury and is nonverbal is just, it's hard. I mean, it's better to do it than not do it, because not doing anything, the individual will become more and more aggressive over time and more just attention seeking and so on. So it gets worse if you don't do anything about it. You can do some things with 2 hours a day, clearly, and God bless you for caring enough to get on this show and ask. It's rare. But, you know, obviously, if it's a self-injurious nonverbal child, they probably need around like 40 hours, quite honestly, because these are things that can be handled. So let's talk about some of the issues that you have here. Self-injurious behavior, the first thing you want to identify is what's causing it again. And again, as we had just said earlier, you want to go to the CIFA, answer some questions on the card, indirect functional assessments, and identify why it's occurring. One of the quick ways to figure that out is does the individual self-injure in front of you when demands are placed? Real self-injurious behavior is done when we're alone. Okay, and people need to understand that. If a child is alone and they self-injure, then the function of it is something internal. That means that the child's doing it either because they need some sort of sensory stimulation, they're doing it because they are in pain, perhaps. Sometimes kids will do that, or something else that's internal to them. If they do it only when they're in front of you, regardless of a demands being placed, then that's attention seeking. Essentially, the child's trying to freak you out. That's simple. Or freak someone else out. They're trying to gain attention. Now, why would they be trying to gain attention? Because usually it's because they're trying to avoid something. But it could also be that they like to cause chaos, you know? So if they're trying to avoid something, that means they usually do this behavior when a demand is placed, right? So you ask them to do something, they'll self-injure. That means, I'm going to do this, you're going to freak out, leave me alone, I'm not going to have to do that thing that you just asked me. So that's the normal scenario that occurs. And if that is the case, then you will need to actually, physically motor the child through the thing that you asked them to do, and then reinforce it and completely ignore the self-injury. But every other function will have a different type of intervention. So it's very important for you to identify why the self-injury occurs. Now, non-verbal. This is a big, huge deal, okay? Because my money's on the fact that this child self-injures due to frustration because they're nonverbal and can't communicate anything. Now, if you're nonverbal and 12, that means that anything you get from the environment is what someone else thought you want.
Can't even imagine how frustrating
exactly. It's horrible. So the most important thing you as a teacher can do for this child is to teach them some form of communication system. This child's nonverbal, 12, the likelihood that they will develop language and speech is low. So the probability is that they will develop much faster if you go to a nonverbal system of communication. I personally would begin with a PECS system, picture exchange communication system, unless my 12-year-old was a reader. If I found that my 12-year-old is very interested in books and letters all the time, then I would assume they have some level of hyperlexia, and I would go into reading augmentative communication devices that work with reading words. Otherwise, I would start with a picture exchange communication system, which is just pictures in a little book, and it's too complicated for me to go into here.
But you can also do it on a pad too.
Which I would never start with.
Okay, good.
Always only start with an actual picture exchange communication system, and then transfer to an aug device that is picture-based.
Okay.
Augmentative devices are on their own very hard and a little bit distracting for our kids. That's my personal choice. I find that paper, giving you an icon or placing an icon is much more effective than touching a box on a computer.
Glad to hear that.
Just that's my experience. Now, and also, by the way, the shaping of this, you start with, just on a PECS program, you start with one icon, right, which is the most wanted thing. So, like, let's say the child's desire is for water, juice, whatever it is, and that's the first icon. They're the most highest manned, right? Now, if you were to do all that on an aug device, or even an iPad, you would have to program it for 1 and then reprogram it for 2 and reprogram it for 3, and the programming becomes pretty time consuming.
Okay.
I usually transfer to an aug device or to an iPad, especially nowadays everybody goes to an iPad, when I have at least, I would say more than 10 or 20 actual icons occurring.
Okay, cool.
And so I usually start using technology when I'm in the classification stage, where it's like one page of food needs, another page of activity needs, another page of so and so. But PECS is awesome because it's not just, it takes you through phases. Andy Bondi really did an amazing job with PECS years ago. And it takes you through basic phases, and it teaches you how to teach the individual how to communicate using pictures. And I really highly recommend that you as a teacher try to learn to do that. We do have a whole module on visual modifications, I don't know if we have a module on how to use PECS. I know we have a module on aug devices in our IBT, Institute for Behavioral Training website.
There are over 40 trainings that are specifically for teachers.
There you go. So you should just go on there.
ibehavioraltraining.com, and they're really inexpensive, as low as $7.50. And you can be watching them at home. You can share it with another teacher it has the ability to grow. You have the ability to make a difference in this child's life, even with the limited hours you have.
Right, absolutely. And thank you for your call and for your email and asking those questions.
If you're okay, I'm going to motor on because we're...
Of course,
all right.
Please, go ahead.
All right, the Haircut Mom wrote back and said, thank you so much from the Haircut Mom, listening with my earphones because my 8-year-old is homesick today. You are my valuable advisors and cannot let her in on the secret or I'll be ABA'd out again. Out ABA'd again, that's what she said. So awesome. You give negative moments like meltdowns as an opportunity. You see negative moments, view them as an opportunity for teaching, and you are truly an inspiration, and that is the absolute truth. Okay, and so now we've got more teachers on the bandwagon.
Yep.
Hi, I'm a part-time preschool teacher. I have a student with autism that is really struggling sitting in her chair when we do our morning meeting. It's about 15 minutes of singing, calendar, and weather. I know she likes the singing, but doesn't understand the calendar. After singing, she starts whining and falls out of her chair on the floor. I have the aide help her sign break, and then she takes a short break. The problem is getting her to come back to her chair. Her behavior is worse the closer she gets to the chair, and it distracts my other students. I want her to come back, but then everyone acts up. Please help me with your awesome advice. Again, loving that we've got teachers asking these questions, because this is the keys to the kingdom.
It really is. I love teachers who are so involved. It's so fabulous. So you actually have two different things going on here. One is the child wanting to leave. That's the behavior that we want to change. And then the other behavior is the child tantruming when you bring them back. Mm-hmm. So they're two separate behaviors, and they have two separate interventions. So the wanting to leave thing, and you can decide which one you want to deal with first. Obviously, I think the one that is more pressing is bringing the child back, and it's a little bit more of an acute procedure. The other one is a shaping procedure. So let's address the whole, coming back to the seat thing. Coming back to the seat thing, I'm sorry, but there's two ways you can deal with this. One is if the child has an ABA program at home, they should be practicing that. In other words, they should take the child out of a preferred activity and bring them into a non-preferred activity. That's what's essentially happening with her, is that when she gets to leave, ask for a break and leave, then she doesn't want to come back. So she doesn't realize that there's an end to the break. You need to establish that there is an end to the break. And the best way to do that is that when she asks for a break, you start a timer. And you actually have her aide or whoever is accompanying her during the break have that timer. When the timer goes off, she has to come back. And that means, I don't care if she's screaming, tantruming, or whatever else, she has to come back. You will model her to come, you will physically help her to come back. She will then have to adhere to whatever it is that you want. And my suggestion would be, the first thing you do, coming back to the chair, that you actually do something very fun for her, so that she's motivated to come back. Now, let's go back to the beginning problem. The beginning problem is that she won't stay. And look at it this way. If she was to stay, you'd never have to deal with giving her a break and then dealing with her not wanting to come back from the break. So teaching her to take a break, or allowing her to say, I want a break, and then getting out, is a good solution for, it's what any behaviorist would probably do, but it is the reason that it's leading to the next tantrum. If she never had a break, she'd never go into that massive tantrum. She'd just try to flail. So your ultimate goal is to try to actually expand the duration of time she's sitting there. Yeah. Now, she goes from a high preferred activity, which is singing, to low preferred activities, which are calendar and whatever else. Yeah. And it's weather. Yeah, and weather. And it's a 10-minute period of time.
15 minutes.
15 minutes, I'm assuming.
Preschool.
I'm assuming the first 5 is the singing, then right. 5 minutes for each of the second activities. So I don't know if it's possible for you, since you are the teacher, that you intermix those things. In other words, you do, let's say, 3 minutes of calendar and a song, another 2 minutes of calendar and a song, and then a couple of minutes of, what's the other thing?
The weather.
Weather and a song. So the song is the reinforcer for her. If you could intermix it into the rest of the stuff that she doesn't prefer, it's much more likely she'll never want to leave. Right. That's one option. Another option is she does the singing, and then it's time for calendar. You can shape up the period of time, calendar and weather. So let's say that's 10 minutes. All she really needs to do is sit for 1 minute of calendar, and then you will reinforce that. Then 2 minutes and reinforce that, 3 minutes, and so on. It'll take you a month, but you have to do that. Now, as you're reinforcing it, understand that the reason it's not pleasant for her is that probably she's not understanding any of calendar and weather. So that's why her ABA home program, or if she has one, should be focused on those two activities at the same time. So they should actually be teaching her steps that she can do to interact in the calendar thing and in the weather thing, and helping her. And then, ideally, this is what I would do. I'd work with the teacher, and I would say, listen, I'm going to teach her these things, but can you please allow her to be the assistant, for instance?
Exactly.
Let her get up and be the one that puts the weather thing up, or give her a task that engages her. But before you do that, make sure someone's teaching her the concepts of calendar and weather, because otherwise she's sitting there listening to Chinese.
Yeah.
And it's not anything interesting at all. The reason the other kids sit there is they want to be the one that gives the correct answer. They want to get reinforce your pride, your pride in them. They want to impress the other kids. Our kids don't have any of those. They're oblivious to how their behavior is. They're just not paying attention. It's not a reinforcer for them if other kids look at them and say, "Ooh, wow." They're just not even there. So for them, it's important that they understand what's going on and enjoy it. So that's why if you could space out the singing, if you know this is something she likes. I mean, there's a million other ideas I could give you. If she does 2 minutes of calendar, you should allow her to have headphones with music, because it sounds like there's so many things you can do to avoid the meltdown.
Yeah.
And that's the key to it.
Well, and I want to say, too, as a former teacher, that I know that you've got a standard that you're trying to get to, that's that 15 minutes of circle time, so that you prep them to go off to kindergarten, where they're going to need to do the 15 minutes of time. But you know that not all the neurotypical kids can do 15 minutes at this time of the year either.
Right.
And that's part of the reason why when she comes back, they're all falling apart, not just because of her, because
everybody's done.
They're all getting close to being done. You're hitting the wall anyway.
This was a preschool age?
It's preschool.
Yeah, it's tough
15 minutes is a lot to ask a preschool. But there are so many songs that go right along with calendar that involve sitting down, standing up. There's
physical
a song,
activity. I agree with you. It's totally great.
But it gets them, the expectation. If you're sitting down, standing up is part of the song. There's Tony Chestnut, where they learn all of the parts of and there's the Days of the Week songs. There's probably like 20 different songs, and they have to stand up and do different motions with it.
Right.
We know, former English teacher, that when we have to teach punctuation to kids, they don't get it, but there's a dance that you can do to teach them to do a comma here and a semicolon.
Oh, really? Yeah. Everything.
Creative. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Get creative. But they're all hitting the wall at 15 minutes. And that's not because you're not a good teacher. You're a great teacher, but 15 minutes is a lot to ask of a preschool kid. Okay. I want to get this one. There's so many questions, and I promise you guys, the ones we don't get to, we will get to with Dr. Nadowski and Dr. Tarbox tomorrow. Okay. Hi, Dr. Doreen. My question is, can an individual grow up with autism and be able to live a normal, independent life? My 4.5-year-old was doing ABA for a year and learned a lot from it, but recently our insurance company says they made a mistake and he can no longer get ABA services because they're self-funded insurance. My son had the benefit from ABA so much he now speaks in 4, 5, and 6, even 7-word sentences for requesting or when he's trying to say something. He recently started asking questions like what, where questions too. I find myself asking every day, if something happens to me, would he be okay? He has a long way to go, but I know ABA helped him a lot. And even if he never loses the label, I just want him to be able to take care of himself. This is really depressing to me. There are so many cruel people in this world, especially when it comes to special needs individual. He's attending an autism ABA school 27 hours a week and is doing okay since he just started 2 months ago. Is one-on-one all day. And thanks, guys. I hope you're not going to give up.
Right. And, depending on where you are, and to go to the beginning, yes, Shannon and I both know that individuals with autism can recover and lead very normal lives and have very healthy lives. I have adults who had autism when they were children and who are functioning completely well, completely normally, finished college, have relationships, and so on and so forth.
And lovely jobs. Amazing jobs.
Wonderful jobs. Extremely lovely people. One of them is a therapist here. I mean, nobody would know it. So, to go back to the issue of insurance, depending on the state you're in, you should look at the Obamacare state plan, because many states elected to have the autism benefit, and so you would drop your work-related insurance and go with the state plan. And I think, if I'm not incorrect. It just came available again. Like, that was the first rush, and now you can sign up for the state plan again. So I would really look into that. If not, I would move. I mean, that's how important it is. Get to a job that is going to provide you the insurance coverage that you need. Yes, you will need insurance coverage for this. It's very expensive. If you are in California and you don't get insurance coverage, then the regional center system will help. But I would really recommend that you don't give up on this, as Shannon said.
And know that there are lots of self-funding companies that are out there that are making the choice day by day and choosing to cover ABA. And they do it when they get pressure to do it, and they do it when they're afraid of getting a lawsuit. If you will write to me, and I know I've got a couple of things from people that I got to write to that they say, I'm the mom who lost the insurance, and include your email so I know which thing gets matched up to which thing, because we've had some people on the show that are just targeting self-funding companies and very nicely and politely going to them and starting a letter writing campaign saying, this is why you should.
Yes,
this is why you should. So, and I would be happy to connect you with those people so that you can make the case.
I mean, in my opinion, this day and age, it's just extremely inappropriate to not have to not respect the fact that all of these states are now mandating this coverage, and to say, hey, I don't care if I have any employees who have kids with autism, they're on their own.
And these companies know, you guys, that the lawsuits are coming. That doesn't help you right now because your child needs a therapy right now.
Yes.
But if we can get some lobbyists to send those nice letters, maybe we can talk your company into doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
So do not give up. There have been lots of companies in the last year that weren't making the decision and are making the decision to cover it, even though they're self-funded, and legally they don't have to right at this moment in time.
Right.
But they know that the lawsuits are coming. So please write to me, say, I'm the one who lost the insurance, here's my email, and let's get you connected with some people who maybe can turn this around, not just for you, but for a lot of people.